This video will present a high-level overview of the transfer grammar, which is located over here. The purpose of the transfer grammar is to take our source representations, our semantic representations we call them, and then the transfer grammar restructures those in whatever way is necessary in order to build a new underlying representation that's appropriate for your target language. Our semantic representations are heavily influenced by English. They contain English concepts and English sentence structures. If you're working in a language that's clause chaining, for example, you can write rules in the transfer grammar that will build clause chains. And in this video, I'd like to present just a very high-level description of each of these rules. But before I do that, I want to mention one thing. All of these rules down through noun-noun relationships, these rules are executed even before the verse is displayed to us here on the screen. I'll draw a red line here. So all of these, from noun-noun relationships upward, all of these rules are executed even before the verse is displayed to us. Okay? Now let's look at each one of these. Complex concept insertion rules. Our semantic representations consist of very simple English words. But, for example here, Esther 4:16:4. My servants and I also won't eat food for 3 days and 3 nights so that we could pray. Well, when someone doesn't eat food so that they can pray, in English we have the word to fast. That's exactly what the word to fast means. So we have rules that can insert words like to fast. Those rules are here. Now we write these. Here are rules for nouns, complex object insertion rules. There are rules for verbs, etc. We write those. All you need to do is turn them on and off by coming down here, complex concepts. And we're going to activate the rule for the verb to fast. So we'll turn this on. We do this audience by audience, by the way. There'll be another video describing this. Now, when we activate that rule and click generate, we see the verb to fast here in the semantic representation, by the way. My servants and I will also fast for 3 days and for 3 nights. So if your language has lexical equivalents for these complex concepts, then you can activate them down with this dialog here. But we write these rules for you. All you do is either activate them or deactivate them. That's what the complex concept insertion rules. There are other rules, for example, that come from the library. We have a grammar library down here, and you can drag rules from here up into your grammar. We'll have another video describing that. So that's this first category, complex concept insertion rules and library rules. Feature adjustment rules. Here, we have 3 buttons at the top, hide features. This is similar to what we saw in another video describing the setup dialog. If your language doesn't use all of these features, then you can hide them. For example, if your language doesn't have any honorifics when people speak to each other, then you can hide those features. For example, speaker, listener, speaker's age, speaker's attitude, etc. You can hide them. That's what this is for. Collapse feature values. Okay, this is English. If I reset this rule, English nouns all have a number value, and the possible values are singular, dual, trial, quadrial, pockal, and plural. English only distinguishes singular, plural, and pockal. So we, English speakers, we don't want to see dual and trial and quadrial in the semantic representations, and we don't want to deal with these feature values in our rules. So we call it collapsing. We can drag dual to plural. We can drag trial to plural and drag quadrial to plural. Now, we'll never see dual, trial, and quadrial either in the semantic representations or in our grammar rules. They're collapsed. You can do that for a number of other features. Add new features. Usually we check all of these, except you can only have either 4 or 5 checked, one of them, not both. These add new features to clauses. There are rules in the background that you can see here, and they each have a certain job. These are very useful features that probably every language will use. So that's what these are for. Those are feature adjustment rules. Styles of direct speech. English doesn't use these. We don't have any honorifics. But for languages that do indicate honor, then they can use these rules. For example, let's say a boy is talking to his father and his attitude is neutral. Then you can set up a speech style. You can have many rows here for different speakers talking to different listeners based on their attitude, the speaker's age, and the speaker-listener age. So you set up a speech style here. Maybe it's honorific, maybe it's formal, maybe it's blunt. You set up your different speech styles, and then subsequent rules will look at the speech style for a particular sentence and provide the appropriate morphology, whether it's an honorific suffix on the verb or a deferential pronoun, whatever. You set up the speech styles here, and subsequent rules will use that information. Target tense, aspect, mood rules. These rules take our time, aspect, and mood and convert them to your target tense and form and aspect and target mood. These take our values that we put in the semantic representations, and then you write rules here that change them to something that's appropriate in your language. There will be a video about these rules as well. Okay, relativization, structures, strategies, and hierarchy. Here's a dialog with 2 tabs. Relative clause structures. Not all languages employ relative clauses, but if they do, the relative clauses are either embedded or adjoined. If they're embedded, they're pre-nominal, post-nominal, or circumnominal. So here at this tab, you can set up the structure of your relative clauses. When we look at the strategies and hierarchy, there are 2 sections, one for restrictive relative clauses, another for descriptive relative clauses. And in each category we have the relativization hierarchy. Subject, object, indirect object, oblique. We don't allow, in our semantic representations, we don't allow relative clauses formed on genitives because too few languages permit those. And same with objects of comparison. So here's the relativization hierarchy. Across the top we have the strategies: noun reduction, gap, pronoun retention, relative pronoun, and relativizer. And if your language only permits relative clauses formed on subjects, for example, then we have other rules that can promote the objects and the obliques, etc., to subjects, so then you can form a relative clause on them. That's what this set of rules is for. Collocation correction rules. These rules will change one target word to another target word based on a specific environment. Just for an example, let's look at the word to roast. Okay, here are all of the places where we've used the word roast in our semantic representations. Now let's say when you're roasting meat, your language uses one word, but when you're roasting grain, your language might use a different word. For example, Tagalog does that. So we can click here. Let's say it uses the word, I'm just making this up using English words as an example. Whenever the patient is grain, we want to use this other word. We don't care who's doing the roasting, so we deselect that. And now whenever the patient is grain, we'll use bake. Whenever the patient is a lamb or meat or head, we'll use the word roast. So collocation correction rules change one target word to another target word based on the context. I'm going to say cancel. I don't want to save that. Noun-noun relationships. Here, you can specify your noun-noun relationships for every pair of nouns. For example, the name Abigail is in a noun-noun relationship only twice so far in our semantic representations. We have Abigail's servant and Abigail's master. Okay, for both of those, in English we use a Saxon genitive. You can specify the values up here. If we go here, feature set, we go to noun phrases, go to thing relationship. We define these values based on whatever our language needs. In English, we have Saxon genitives, Norman genitives, bare stem prenominal modifiers, etc. So you define these values, then they're available here, and you can select whichever value is appropriate for each noun-noun pair. Theta grid adjustment rules. Let's look at a couple of examples. For all of the occurrences of the word anoint in our semantic representations, there's always an agent noun phrase. There's always a patient noun phrase. This purple cross-hatching indicates it's optional. So there's an optional beneficiary and there's an optional instrument. And for some of the theta grid adjustment rules, if your language needs a completely different structure, then you'll do a significant amount of work down here in the output structure. But for many of these, you'll simply provide the appropriate prepositions or postpositions in these noun phrases and the grammatical relation. So that's what this theta grid adjustment rule does. Let's look at one more. For the verb accuse, it takes a propositional patient, an object complement clause. And so for accuse, in its theta grid adjustment rule, there's an object complement clause, and you specify the complementizer, and then how the complement clause should be constructed in your target language. So that's what these rules do. There's one more, structural adjustment rules. These provide all the structural adjustments, whatever your language might need, that hasn't been accomplished by the rules up above. Let's look at a couple. For example, metric conversions. Convert kilograms to pounds. So these rules, there's an input structure and an output structure. And whenever the input structure matches what occurs in the semantic representation, then whatever changes you specify in the output structure, those will be done. For example, here, we've set up a table. This converts kilograms, which we use in our semantic representations, to pounds for English. So 100 kilograms is 220 pounds. 7 kilograms is about 15 pounds. 16 kilograms is about 36 pounds, etc. So we set up these tables. There are other rules as well. For example, we can combine two simple sentences into one more complex sentence. Then David went to Saul and said to him. The sentences in the semantic representations are very simple. So in certain conditions, we'll want to combine them. And that's what this rule does. This rule has 12 different structures. And each of these combines two simple sentences into one more complex sentence. So that's what the transfer grammar does.